Oh, welcome to episode 5 of The Perspective. We've had plenty to talk about in episodes 1 to 4, and today we have an outstanding guest to pick over, well, to take maybe a broader view of the football season so far. Adrian Kajumba is, I was going to say one of the rising stars of the game, but he's now well established on the Daily Mail. How more established can you get than that? After you started your career in Southampton. Yeah,
Yeah, that's correct. Certainly in terms of being a sports journalist, yeah, I
yeah,
went back there in about 2005. So that's how
yeah,
I started out as a sports journalist.
yeah. And then on to Star.
Yeah, Daily
Mi-
Star and then the
I,
Daily Mirror.
I first read you in the Mirror, and then on to the Daily Mail, and onward and upward. Um, I we are, of course, it's not just me. It is Omar Garrick, my co-host on The Perspective, and we're really, really glad to welcome Adrian today. So much to talk about. Omar, where do you want to start?
Yeah, so why don't we start with the European Super League, get it out of the way quick and early because
if only, if only.
because it was such a big week in terms of the history and the context around our game, and I think it's had an impact on every single supporter out there. I mean, Adrian, what was your assessment of the whole entire Super League calamity? Because we saw this proposal being made last Sunday, and then 48 hours later, we all saw it come crumbling down because, yeah, the response and reaction to it was just, I think they overestimated how different the reaction was going to be. So what was your assessment of the whole European Super League in general?
I'm sorry, you just froze there,
Yeah.
but I think you kind of just summed it up there. And the reaction, the kind of groundswell of opinion after this sort of idea came out, it just kind of summed up, what everybody thought about the idea. I understand the kind of essence of what these sort of bigger clubs wanted. They want more money. They obviously want a greater share of the sort of prize money and TV money, and for their power to be reflected in that side of things. But the way they went about it, in two elements was just totally wrong, and that's what led to the backlash. One, to set up a competition that you just have a divine right to be in purely because of your name. It's just impossible. That it just goes against the idea of what football is. Competition. You look at West Ham, for example. I was speaking to Thomas Tuchel on Friday, and in his press conference, we were asking him about, West Ham are one of these clubs who are a sort of surprise story. They're overachieving. They deserve the right to be able to qualify for Champions League.
Yeah.
That's what this Super League was trying to get rid of. It just can't happen. There's no two ways about it. It just cannot happen. So the actual format of the competition was wrong, and also the way the clubs went about doing it underhand, snide. The motives agreed, behind everyone's back. I spoke to somebody at one of the clubs outside the top six, so-called top six, last week, and they were saying there's long been this suspicion about these clubs having their own separate meetings beyond the ones that all the 20 Premier League clubs have together.
Yeah.
And and then when you see something like this come out, all those suspicions are just kind of borne out. It's true, because they clearly were hatching this horrendous plan behind everyone's back. And to do it without the consultation of fans, even thinking about fans. I was speaking to sort of people during the week last week, and they almost couldn't believe that these owners thought it was going to get through.
Yeah.
They were pretty confident it was going to fall apart because of the hurdles they would have had to pass for it to come to fruition. But the fact that they even were having these conversations and had got this far, and the website and founder members and all the rest of it, and just thought that it was all going to come off when you'd not consulted so many different people within the game. In some ways, it shows a kind of arrogance
Yes.
of some of these clubs.
Speaking to friends, including Omar, over the, I don't know how ever long it's been since this ghastly idea was dangled in front of us. There was certainly Omar and I both felt a sense of revulsion and of antipathy towards football. It's wearing off now, I have to say, as we as we approach, we are talking now, we're recording on the day of the Chelsea Real Madrid match, and tomorrow Paris Saint-Germain against Man City. And I found myself watching the League Cup final, the Carabao Cup final. Did you share that sense of revulsion, and Adrian, and has it worn off, or is there still a lingering distrust of the people who are in charge of the clubs, if not those who support and play for them?
I don't know. Do you know how I felt last week as this story was unfolding? It actually felt like football in itself became very, very irrelevant.
Yeah.
I don't even know if this really makes sense, but I'd kind of written a couple of articles last week that were just, that were published last week.
Yeah.
We didn't even really want to publicize them because you just think everything is about the ESL and the impact this could have had on football. And actual talking about what's going on a pitch, transfers, players, injuries, whatever, it all just felt really irrelevant. And that just kind of underlines how big everything was. I was at Arsenal on Friday when they were protesting, when the fans were protesting against Stan Kroenke, the owner, but also there was elements of the ESL behind that protest as well. And again, the game just felt completely irrelevant. And that's just what last week did. There was just something going on that was just so much bigger than the actual game itself and the individual characters and players. And it was almost about the future of the game.
Yeah, and I think as well, sorry, Paddy.
Carry on, Omar.
I think you saw that as well, with some of the results over the weekend. I mean, Leeds, Manchester United, you would never expect that to be a 0-0 draw, for example. Even the Carabao Cup final, it took an 83rd minute header to win the game. But I know Manchester City missed loads of chances, but I think you could see the impact it had on the players performing in terms of their performance levels, because I think it sent shockwaves definitely across the whole of European football. And to be honest with you, Adrian, I know you touched upon a bit about football being a bit irrelevant and stuff. I don't think this situation is going to go away anytime soon. I mean, Paddy talked about are we forgetting about it and stuff like that. I think that the trust between the owner and the supporter is just completely broken at various clubs. I mean, I can talk in particular Manchester United, because Joel Glazer was one of the ones spearheading the European Super League. And as Gary Neville alluded to before previously, there's no place, I think, for the Glazer family in Manchester anymore. I mean, Adrian, what do you think's next in this saga? Because it doesn't feel like it's over yet. Florentino Perez came out and said that there is a binding contract that these clubs have signed for, so technically they're still in this competition. How do you see it playing out?
I think you're right in the sense that it's not the end of this. Again, just from conversations having with people who speak to these clubs, and even some of the people within the clubs, this plan was very serious. They do, these clubs do really want to, whether it's form a breakaway league or have a new competition again, where they can get a majority of the money, whether that's from the TV money or prize money, and have their status within European football reflected in how often they're in these competitions. There is a desire within these clubs to be involved in such a competition. What may happen next time, if it does come up, is there will maybe be a little bit more consultation. And if they don't learn from this, I dread to, I can't even think of the words to describe what sort of people they are involved if they don't learn from what's happened over last week. I guess the other thing as well is going to be the ramifications, the implications for the clubs. And some of the sort of the senior executives and officials at these clubs who are involved in the plans. You obviously already seen some of them have to leave various positions that they hold within Europe and within their clubs. Talk about Ed Woodward. There are going to be punishments coming as well.
I mean, I don't suppose we can ever stop them talking, and it's quite strange that I mean, even if the European Super League hadn't taken place, I suppose journalists like you, Adrian, would have been addressing the subject of the reforms that went through the system on Monday, while we were steaming about the extreme thing. I'd be interested to know if you agree on this. I don't think it was a diversionary tactic, and what you've just said rather backs that up, that this is serious. But I mean, the UEFA reforms that went through at the same time, they weren't too lovely, were they? I mean, more meaningless Champions League group games. Lovely. Look forward to that.
No, I mean, I'm a bit old school when it comes to the Champions League. I still remember the European Cup. I talk about being old school.
Yeah.
I remember when it was just, the knockout competition, and it was just the champions being involved in it. And it's become, because of the way you can qualify for it, finishing in the top four in England, for example.
Yeah.
I'm not surprised. Before you had to be the champions of your country to be in this competition. And now, there's going to be even more games, in the new format, the big league system.
Yeah.
I think it's a top 8 qualifying, and then the other 8 qualifying through some bizarre knockout element to it. You can get into it just because of your status in years gone by. It's just it's just crazy. The more and more they reform this competition, the further and further away they get from the actual title, it being about the champions.
Absolutely.
I don't see what's the need to change for it, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
I mean, I get the need to reform things from time to time to modernize with the times we're in, but I don't see anything wrong with the Champions League at the moment, to be honest with you. And I think all of it comes down to one motivation, which is money. And I think that's the main reason why everybody's involved in it. But yeah, it's certainly a situation which is going to develop. And one.
Why do Manchester City need more money? Why do Paris Saint-Germain need? But they don't need money. But the guys that were making up the numbers here, the Atletico Madrids, the Inter, Milan, all in, small. They've become, compared with an English club, they've become small clubs. And I'm astonished that 6 profoundly stupid, I was going to say English clubs, but they're not English clubs really, international clubs based in England, fell for something that's not in their interests. But the foolishness of club owners should never surprise you.
No, never. And it's something we're definitely going to be keeping an eye on in the perspective, I'm sure of that. Anyway, let's move on to Manchester City and Pep Guardiola. They won the Carabao Cup with a 1-0 victory over Tottenham Hotspur. Adrian, Gary Neville said Pep Guardiola could be one of the greatest coach ever. Is he correct?
So Alex Ferguson will always hold that title for me, as much because of what he did in England, but also what he did in Scotland before.
Yeah.
And when I think of what he did with Manchester United, they are the giant today. Very much largely because of what he did, following in the footsteps of the likes of Sir Matt Busby. But because of what he did with that club, he's built them into the juggernaut. Certainly commercially, maybe not on the today, is down to him. When I look at Pep Guardiola and that particular debate, he's probably going to have the CV and the number of trophies by the end of it. The Barcelona team he created was one of the best we may ever see. I think it's probably
yes.
What I would say is he managed a Barcelona team with the best player, arguably ever in the history of football. And won 2 Champions Leagues there. Since he's left, he's managed the best team in Germany, the most powerful team in Germany, and similarly in England, not yet won a Champions League. Actually, only got as far as the Champions League semi-finals. So when I think of what Sir Alex Ferguson did in Scotland, and what he turned Manchester United into, I think that was both of those have been bigger, harder tasks than what Pep Guardiola has had to do with the 3 clubs he's had so far. Do not get me wrong. You give him the best players, he'll turn them into an even better team than they were before.
Yeah.
As I said, you can't deny what he did with that Barcelona team, but I don't think he'll be the best manager ever. I still think it will be Sir Alex Ferguson.
Yeah, it's an interesting one I find with Guardiola, because it's obvious the impact he's had on English football in general, because I don't remember a time before he came into the Premier League where we were using words such as like midfield pivot and, you know, in between the channels and stuff like, and terminologies like that. So it's obvious in terms of the wider aspect of football, how he's influenced others to perform to a level that I don't think we've seen before. I mean, the biggest evidence of that was, you know, the record points tally, getting 100 points, and then that being consecutively beat the next season. I mean, not consecutively beat, but over the 95 point mark that Jose Mourinho had in his first season at Chelsea, which was the record points total before the 100 points. So it's clear he's had a massive impact. But yeah, I'm going to have to agree with you. I think, you know, the longevity of Sir Alex, what he did at Manchester United, I think it takes a lot of beating. But I mean, Paddy, what's your opinions of Guardiola? I mean, how does the future of English football look should he leave in the near distant future?
Well, bleaker. Obviously, I think what he's brought to English football is he's enhanced its beauty. I mean, as I think somebody who's you know, unbiased. Okay, I've got a season ticket at Fulham and I love Fulham, but I'm not really, you know, my heart is in Dundee FC, so I'm sort of unbiased still, even now. And what he's done is he's enhanced the landscape with beauty. I mean, listening to Adrian there, and a very sober, concise dissection of the issues. And I'm very glad, by the way, that you brought in Matt Busby, the great Matt Busby. When you talk about the greatest managers of all time, you know, he's always going to be in that envelope, if not the one that you pull out when the awards are handed out. But for me, the Guardiola himself modestly makes the point that he's never. I mean, this in a sense is his toughest job, because managing, as Adrian pointed out, at Barcelona initially with Xavi and Iniesta and Messi, probably initially only the third force in the team, and then being there through the peak of Messi, and was obviously great. It brought, you know, unbelievable grandeur to the European and Spanish stage. Then going to Bayern, where you are dominant. All you've got to do is make sure you stay on the horse, you know, like a good jockey. So that's simplifying it. But you come to England, and it is, thank God, a different environment, a very competitive environment, where, you know, you used to have the Valencia, the Deportivo La Coruñas in Spain. And you used to have, you know, a strong Dortmund in Germany. That it's still tough in England when you have teams like West Ham, when you have teams like Leicester City. It's still a harder slog, and you know, I think he's proved himself, you know, just one of the best. I mean, don't forget, if we'd been having this conversation in, well, around the time that, well, about 10 years ago, we would find it very hard to get past Mourinho. And we'd be saying, you know, Guardiola's task is to equal and then overshadow, but Mourinho, can he do it? So, yeah, it's. I can't remember what the question was, Omar. I told you I'd start rambling when we get on.
Well, what do you think English football would look like should Pep Guardiola leave?
All I would say is bleak, less pretty, in the same way as it became less pretty when Wenger moved from his first glorious decade of beauty at Highbury and then Emirates. You know, the loss when that became still good but not fantastic, that might happen to Manchester City. Who knows? You know, Tito Villanova took over from him, however tragically, for a short period, and kept kept the ball rolling at Barcelona tragically for a short period, and maybe City could find someone else. But really, I just want him to, as a neutral, I just want Pep Guardiola to stay at Manchester City, enriching our footballing lives for as long as possible.
I'm not saying anything particularly groundbreaking when I agree with you, Paddy. I do think that when the time comes that he does leave Man City, I think you might see a City that look a little bit more vulnerable. I think at the moment sometimes, and you remember the season they became Centurions, teams were beaten before first whistle.
Yeah.
You watch the start of that Carabao Cup final on Sunday, and you're thinking this score could be anything. That is what City are capable of under Guardiola. And I don't wish to make it sound like I'm talking him down when I put Sir Alex Ferguson above him, because Pep Guardiola is clearly an unbelievable manager.
Yeah.
He improves players. You can even go through this team. He's got a moment. Yes, they've cost X, Y, Z. You can see the improvement in John Stones. You can see, maybe not this season, but you can see the improvement Sterling has made under Guardiola. This season, maybe not his best.
Yeah.
Cancelo. You can go through the City side and see players that have improved under him. And as I said, he's clearly an unbelievable manager, and he's going to have a great role of list of honours come the end of it. But yeah, I just think that best ever. I just think that the task that Sir Alex Ferguson had is slightly more difficult.
Yeah, you've got to remember that Alex Ferguson, I wouldn't say saw off the challenge of Manchester City, but had to cope with it. And in his final season, won the league with a not particularly brilliant side. In the face of competition, he'd just seen off. Do you remember when Mourinho's first spell at Chelsea in that fantastic team that won the league 2 years running? And you thought, Ferguson, the old man, has been finally defeated, and he comes back and he wins a trio of titles with all the money at Chelsea, all the money at Man City, and Omar, Alex Ferguson with a small club, impoverished by debt. It was a real David and Goliath story.
Just on Guardiola, I guess we're talking about his managerial career, Barcelona, Bayern Munich, and now Man City. And I did make the point. Yes, he's worked with the best player and a supporting cast that were unbelievable. Barcelona, Bayern Munich, the best in Germany. Man City, certainly financially the strongest in this country.
Yeah.
And with Guardiola, you always have that. Oh, wouldn't it be great if he could manage slightly, take on a lesser challenge and see how good he is, which I understand and I would like to see myself.
Yeah.
At the same time, I do appreciate that he gets the jobs he gets. He doesn't get those jobs.
Well,
by sheer luck, it's because those clubs see they want the best manager. Their players will flourish under him, so they go for him. So I understand that.
Yeah, and
but does want a challenge. I can assure we have a manager, and he would definitely find a place on the bench for Pep Guardiola. Now, Adrian, can I just ask you, but we'll be going out just before the second semi-final of the Champions League. Do you think the big question about Man City, before we leave that topic, are they going to make history by winning the Champions League this time?
I wonder if, and there are not too many games with Man City where the lack of a striker can be a problem. But I wonder if maybe at the very, very the highest level of games, which is what this Champions League semi-final will be.
Yeah.
PSG have just knocked out the holders. I wonder if that could be an issue for Man City.
Yeah.
It's going to be very tight. Just Mbappe and Neymar, PSG have maybe got that cutting edge. What I would say is probably defensively, City are better than PSG. So maybe that cancels itself out. It's going to be very tight. I honestly can't call the semi-final at all. I'm going to sit on the fence, if you don't mind.
No, that's your privilege. You're the guest.
No, yeah. I think...
Does this? Sorry, Omar. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just gonna say it's gonna be the two, just quickly touching upon the two Champions League contests. I think they're going to be
Yeah.
two fascinating ties. And I think,
Yeah.
starting tonight, well, my score prediction, I think
As
Chelsea
we
are going
speak.
to, I think Chelsea are going to do it. I think Chelsea could beat Real Madrid, to be honest with you, the way they're going.
Wow.
Their squad, I've got a funny feeling that they could win the Champions League as well. I don't know what it is, but I think it's more the sense that they spent over £200 million in the summer and Tuchel's getting out of the squad what Lampard should have been doing at the start. And now we're seeing that, and we're seeing it come to fruition. And I think players are playing for him. He's got a good harmony with all the players there. And I think we could be in for a surprise with Chelsea towards the end of the season.
That's very brave, considering a lot of people are going to be watching us after the first leg. So 10 out of 10 for bravery, Omar, and it may well be 10 out of 10 for prescience as well.
Omar, do you think Chelsea have got enough attacking wise to get past Real Madrid? Defensively, they've been very good under Tuchel.
They've been very. I've been very impressed with them defensively. I think that his implementation of the utilization of fullbacks, similar to what we see with like Jurgen Klopp with his fullbacks, he's getting more and more out of them. Whether that's Reece James on the right or Azpilicueta on the right, or whether it's Ben Chilwell on the left. But I know he's not using Marcus Alonso as much. But I think they've been vital for the way Chelsea have been playing recently, offering that width, and then they've also got a really nice balance in midfield. I think Mason Mount, although I think he needs to improve on his finishing side of things, I think he's a wonderfully gifted individual. I think he's got an array of talent with him, and that balance, as I said, with Kante, the holding midfield, of Mason Mount doing the attacking prowess, and then, I mean, Werner is very conflicting. I personally have my opinions on him, and I don't think he's been that good this season. But I think against a side like Real Madrid, he'd be so effective on the counter attack. If he gave Real Madrid the ball, I think Werner running at you is something that I don't think any defender would want with his pace. Finishing needs to improve, certainly. And then I also think Hakim Ziyech, I think he's got a brilliant left foot on him. And I think it's a weird one with Chelsea. I think that defensively they're so nicely set up, and I think they got such a good balance in midfield that I think they just have a chance. I know they need a striker, don't get me wrong, but you never know. I mean, Tammy Abraham got like 5 minutes. I mean, could he have a strong end to the season? You just don't know. So it'll be interesting to see. But yeah, my wild card is a Chelsea, Adrian, throwing it out there. But let's move on to the player of the year. Adrian, who's your player of the year and why?
Well, now it's completely up in the air. If you'd asked me this around Christmas, I would have said Jack Grealish. That's who I would have gone for.
Yes, of course.
Because he started the season so well. He was winning games for Aston Villa, running games for Aston Villa. I can't remember which international break it was. It probably in October, November. He got in the England squad. I think they played Belgium. He was England's best player. They went back to Wembley. He was England's best player. He was playing so well that it was making me think that the clubs who maybe could have tried to sign him last year before he signed his new contract would have been kicking themselves.
Yeah.
And then the other reason why I like Jack Grealish is one, because he was playing consistently. He was doing it every week. And it was also just nice to have somebody who wasn't from one of the traditional bigger clubs who was kind of in that conversation.
Yeah.
He wasn't like having to win the league. His performance levels were just so high, and there was the end product coming with it as well. But now Jack Grealish has missed, I think, the last couple of months. I mean, Villa's form has tailed off a little bit, which again underlines his importance to them. Yeah. And I just feel what his absence has done is he's probably brought in a couple of other players, has made it maybe more certainly made me less certain who should get that honour. I mean, Kevin De Bruyne is arguably best player in the league, probably best player in the league. Harry Kane is having, I was having a look at the stat, he's actually having his best season for Spurs.
Amazing, isn't it?
In terms of his goals and assists and the player he has shown us that he is in terms of his creativity, his passing and things like that. I don't think we've seen that on the consistent level that maybe we've seen it this year.
Yeah.
Before Bruno Fernandes Bruno Fernandes's numbers are there. Again, his form has dried up, but you can't argue. I think 24 goals and 14 assists for Manchester United. He's shown that last season wasn't just like a fluke. His introduction, if you like, wasn't a fluke. Gundogan's had a great spell. I actually quite like Ruben Dias.
Yeah, but he's mine. He's mine.
I think I'd actually go, partly because all of those guys I mentioned have either had little dips or spells out of the team, and I think Harry Kane will maybe suffer because of Spurs as a whole.
Yeah.
I think when you look at Spurs this season, bizarrely they're still in a great shot getting in the top 4, but there's just maybe a perception until you look deeply at Spurs this season that it's not been great.
No.
Yeah.
And I think that maybe will colour people's minds in terms of when they look at Harry Kane's season.
Yeah.
So I wonder. I mean, John Stones have been great. I mentioned him before. You mentioned Mason Mount, another good performer this season. But I'm leaning towards Ruben Dias for the impact he's had in his debut season, on his impact on John Stones and his impact on Man City as a whole as well.
Yeah.
It was last season. It still amazes me that they wanted Harry Maguire, and not only did they not sign Harry Maguire, but they also didn't sign. They also didn't sign another centre back. And that amazes me how you can go from being interested in a player who's 80 million and not have a plan B. It was clearly an issue that they wanted to resolve. They didn't have a backup to solve it. Ruben Dias has come in. Again, he's another one who's been linked with clubs in the past. And I talk about Grealish and clubs who maybe been interested in him, not moving for him and regretting it. I think Ruben Dias would have done that for the clubs that have looked at him in the past. And I think, again, he's been there the whole season. Man City are going to win the league. Defensive record's been very good. Probably edging towards him.
Yeah.
Centre backs, in a way, are the new strikers. I mean, there's so few of them. A goal scorer is like gold nowadays. A centre half is like gold because the game produces so few of them.
I think as well. I think on that point, Paddy, when you look at what somebody like Virgil van Dijk,
that's what I was just going to say.
The transformative effect he had on Liverpool, Manchester United were then looking for that in Maguire, weren't they? And
there's much more of an understanding, as you say, that they can be game changers, centre backs. But I'd like to throw another one in. I would seriously consider voting for Johnny Evans at Leicester. I think. Given Leicester, you talked about the big clubs. Are Leicester a big club? Well, they should be, because they've won the title only, what was it, 4 years ago, something like that. And now here they are, probably favourites for third place. I would think, despite all the praise that we've been lumping on Chelsea. But I would think Johnny Evans has played such fantastic football all season, and as Brendan Rodgers pointed out after their most recent victory over, who was it? 2-1.
Crystal Palace last night.
Crystal Palace. It pointed out that he has developed this extraordinary ability to be in the right place. Whatever happens, he's standing there, combing his hair, smoking a cigar and making a chicken omelette, before the ball comes down. So I just think watching him has been great. I'd like to. I'm not saying he's footballer of the year candidate, but Wesley Fofana alongside him, what a prospect that is. The whole Leicester team, Tielemans, I've not seen him have a bad game, and of course Schmeichel. I think he's been a big character in the English game for years. I believe he had a dad that played, but who remembers him now? I mean, the other ones, you've mentioned all of them. The only one that hasn't been mentioned so far that I had on my list, and in a way, Adrian, I'm glad you mentioned Kevin De Bruyne, because although he's had a few injuries this season, he's been phenomenal for the last 3 years. And there's almost a sort of totting up process that would lead you to vote for Kevin De Bruyne. And the other one that nobody's mentioned so far, because he's been just good in every game, is Luke Shaw. Left back, Manchester United, possibly left back for England. I don't know, Adrian, you'd know more about that than me, but would he be a candidate to be in the first team for the Euro 2020?
Yeah, I mean, he should be. There's Ben Chilwell there as well. I mean,
Luke Shaw's probably more solid at the back, isn't he?
Yeah, the way he's. I think the thing with Luke Shaw has obviously been getting over that horrendous injury he had, and then getting over Mourinho's management of him.
Yeah.
And under Solskjaer, he's flourishing. The way he's performing, the confidence he's playing with, he's getting up and down. I think I saw a stat yesterday that said he's created the most chances of. Sure,
Yeah.
it was with a picture of Lionel Messi, so I'm assuming that must be in Europe. I think it includes things like free kicks and corners, and he takes them for Manchester United as well. So
well,
I'm sure that's a factor.
Omar, does the star? Obviously, the star gets the casting vote. So, who is the Perspectives sort of interim choice as FWA Footballer of the Year?
I think we're going to have to be down to Adrian as well. I think we're going to go for Ruben Diaz. I mean, he would have been my choice, because I think if you look at the stats, if you look how many goals City conceded in the previous season compared to now, I mean, every single other centre back that plays for City, when they play alongside him, he just makes them 100 times better. I think he improves their performances. If you look at him, he's a leader, he's vocal, he's commanding at the back. He organises his defence.
Yeah, he's that tackle at Wembley. Everyone thought it was a foul, but it
was a perfectly timed challenge.
Wonderful tackle.
And I just think he's been a revelation, and the fact that he's only 23 still, I mean, what a career I think he's got ahead of him.
What's he going to be like when he grows up? I mean, he's fantastic. And so that, but I would like to stress to everybody that the race isn't over yet. That the Football Writers Association has issued a deadline. I think it's it's mid-May, so we've all got time to change our mind. But that sounds like a very resonant and convincing steer, shall we say, from Adrian Kajumba. Now, if we review the whole season, there was one other subject that I want to discuss, which is this has been, I think, the first full season of taking the knee. It's definitely, I don't know if we'd all agree that it's definitely been a season when the issues raised by that have come to the forefront of English football, despite all the competition for headlines. Adrian, do you feel, what next? Do we just, do players just take the knee forever? Do the Premier League have full page adverts in newspapers, for which thank goodness? But what happens next?
It's a very tough question, because of what the idea of the gesture is to kind of, and what the gesture has sparked, which is a debate.
Yes.
I listened to Troy Deeney the other day when he's talking about youngsters are now asking, why does it happen?
Yeah.
And then it leads into a further conversation about racism, injustice, underrepresentation, and all the issues that are connected to it. So it has a huge value there. But then, in terms of what happens next, what you have is, if the authorities decide to stop doing it, does that mean they feel that they don't need to keep making those points anymore? Do they feel that the job is done, which clearly it's not? So there's going to be a big decision to be made in terms of when they decide to stop it, why they decide to stop it.
Yes.
On top of that, I fully understand the stance of people like Wilfred Zaha, who said that whose point is that some people feel that just taking the knee is enough. So he's not arguing with the gesture itself. He's arguing with the sense that the act is making some people feel that enough is being done to raise the issues that I mentioned, awareness, racial injustice, underrepresentation, etc., etc. And the kind of issue with Zaha's stance is that some people have turned it into an attack on taking a knee, which is not what it is. He's saying that there needs to be more done on top of that. to combat these issues, and that is what is next, and that needs to be right across the game, doesn't it? It needs to start with much better deterrence. You mentioned Andre Kudela, the Slavia Prague defender. It needs to start with bigger punishments for acts of racism, whether that's from players, from fans, clubs. We were talking about the ESL earlier on, and UEFA and various bodies were very quick to say how strong they were going to be on these clubs for joining up this competition. Why can't you do the same with racism, which is a far bigger problem, for example? So what's next is not just stopping taking the knee if that's the final decision. It's building on that, the fact that people are talking, having the conversation and talking about the issue. And it's taken advantage of the fact that it's now a subject that racism in football, people are not afraid to discuss, and there's a will, I hope, a big enough will within football to try and challenge it. I remember I was reading an interview with Sean Wright-Phillips over the weekend, where I think he said that when him and some of the other England players got racially abused in Spain, they were told not to talk about it afterwards and kind of just carry on. That's not the case anymore.
No.
We're in a different place, and the debate that stems from the taking of the knee is part of that. You don't just stop it and it goes quiet. People would want to know and will want there to be more action after this.
I think also as well.
Omar was saying earlier sorry to cut across you, Omar, but I guess it's the same point you're going to make.
Yeah.
You were talking about the Andre Kudela punishment, which is a UEFA punishment of 10 UEFA games.
Yeah.
Therefore, I mean, obviously Slavia Prague will qualify, or whatever club he might go to have a good chance of qualifying for Europe. But if they don't, he doesn't get banned at all, does he?
No. Well, he does. He gets banned for 10 UEFA competition games, and that includes the national team. So he's missing the Euros.
Yeah.
So it's a significant punishment for him.
Yeah.
In terms of what he misses, I think he's 34 as well. So for him, that will be, and if I remember correctly, he's only just recently become a Czech Republic international in the last couple of years.
Yeah.
This would have been the first major tournament for him. So it is a big miss for him.
Yeah.
On a personal note.
I wasn't aware of the international dimension, and that does make sense actually.
So, but I mean, the issue with that punishment is, and my reading and the interpretation certainly from Glenn Kamara, the Rangers player's lawyer, and seemingly from there has been a bit of back and forth and uncertainty, but seemingly from the UEFA regulations, they've given him the minimum punishment. So, that's why the punishment was criticised, because you think you've done something horrendous. You've done something horrendous, and I think the premeditated nature of what he did to Glenn Kamara by covering his mouth, if it's even possible, makes it even worse.
Yeah.
So, you just think if there's a minimum, why is he only getting the minimum?
Yeah.
And I think that's why the punishment has been criticised, and even though 10 games in itself is big, and what he's going to miss is big, you just feel if there was an option to give him more, why not give him more?
Yeah.
Darren Lewis, who everyone knows, hugely respected, great journalist, did an interview with Alexander Seferin, the UEFA president, and he was talking about, UEFA can be stronger. They can take even bigger punishments similar to the ones they were threatening clubs being involved in ESL. They can do similar with players, with clubs and with countries. So, I mean, it's one thing saying you can do it, but why not do it?
But I think, I think, well, touching upon your points, Adrian, I think the Glenn Kamara and the Andre Kudela situation in itself, I mean, I know Kieran Trippier, he got banned from playing football for like 10 games, and it was involved in like a betting incident. Don't get me wrong, that's bad, but to say that a betting incident equates to the same amount of time or the same amount of lengthy time ban you can get for being racist, I think it just underlines a really important issue, and like how far we need to come in order to make a change, I think. And also as well, I'm really interested to see how much of an impact the taking the knee actually has, because we've seen clubs like QPR, for example, saying they're not going to take the knee anymore because they don't feel as if it's having an impact. And I think before lockdown, a lot of racist incidents occurred from the terraces. So, for example, Raheem Sterling at Stamford Bridge, Fred in the Manchester Derby at the Etihad Stadium, but we've also seen now a rise in online abuse, and I think that's come from all sorts of different individuals, whether they go to football matches, I don't know, but because we've seen that, social media has been almost like the coping mechanism for supporters to vent their frustration, because they can't go to matches, they can't speak to their friends who they sit with in the terraces. So I'm interested to see on that front whether it has taken it has made an impact, in the sense that it stopped racism completely from football supporters in football matches. And we will not know that until fans are allowed back in stadiums, and I think that's when we can truly assess the impact all of this has had, because I think, as I said, a lot of the racist incidents at football matches occurred from the football supporters, from the terraces. I mean, Antonio Rudiger as well, that's another one I can touch on, at Spurs. So it's an interesting situation, one that I feel we're still so far behind on. I feel really passionate about this because I've been on the end of like abuse and stuff, and I'm sure loads of people have. I'm definitely not the only one, and I just think we're still quite a way behind. I think that we're making good steps, don't get me wrong, but 100% more needs to be done.
But that's the thing, isn't it? Taking of the knee in itself will not stop racism. It will not be a deterrent. It will not educate people, which ultimately is what is required.
But it will show them. It will show them the book. I mean, but it doesn't provide the education. And I was impressed, Adrian, by what you said earlier about kids saying, "Why are they doing that?" And that's about heightening awareness. But it seems to me that people could just in the same way as 10 racist fans in a crowd of 10,000 can ruin the occasion for everybody, especially the victims, obviously. That there's the social media aspect of it really needs to be driven out. It's a wider problem of people, billionaires making money out of crass behavior. This has really got to be stopped. And I think at last governments are taking control of that. The 4-day ban on use of social media by football clubs, again, helps. But the key thing, you will always get people who have, views that are repugnant, that most of us find repugnant. And somehow wasting energy on them when the visible stuff is what we care about. In other words, finding the successor to taking the knee, the thing that will continue to raise awareness. I was going to use the word gesture, but gestures are for decades ago. The action. Is there anything that either of you two can think of that next season, taking the knee plus, something beyond that will continue to raise awareness? Because awareness of this issue, it seems to me, is fundamental and must always be fundamental to the playing of all sport, especially
one thing that I think is very popular with matchday going supporters is buying the programs, because they get that authentic matchday going experience. And I think for example, off the top of my head, maybe incorporating like a front page cover, like for every single football match they go to, every single underline the main issue of racism, maybe like completely blacking out the match day covers on like programs, for example. That could be one thing we could do, because I know, as I said, loads of football supporters, buy match day programs. And I think if you had that on the main front cover, people may start taking notice of that as well. That's just one example off the top of my head, but there's probably better ways we can go about doing it. I mean, for example, at Old Trafford, there's loads of, even at, loads of other football matches, you see flags across and banners across the stadium with loads of messages. Maybe implementing more banners that kind of suggest that we should need to kick it out, that we need to get rid of racism in our game, something that is visual and could have a striking impact on the match day supporter, I think is absolutely needed. But yeah, Adrian, what were your thoughts on it?
I was just going to say, I mean, the awareness is important, but the awareness or the spotlight has been shone on this issue for many, many years, and there have been people who've been working on this subject in football for much longer than I have, and it's got past the point of just needing to raise awareness of the issue. It's now about the deterrent that I mentioned. It's about that. They need to be so much. They need to be so much more stronger. If people don't learn, that they have to feel through whatever punishment that may be.
You talk about raising awareness. There's nobody in the world that isn't aware that killing your fellow man or woman isn't a bad thing. But what limits the number of killings in the world is policing. So that the policing is fundamental to this. Awareness, I think we're all aware by now, and we must continue to be aware. But the punishment and the certainty of being caught. I remember Michel Platini saying about 20 years ago, walk off the field. And I think it's time to stop worrying about the agent provocateur. In other words, the guy whose team is losing, who shouts something racist in the hope that the players will walk off and the game will have to be replayed. I think it's time to stop worrying about that. And as soon as anything racist happens, off the field. And stay off until the alleged perpetrators are apprehended and booked in for a bit of justice.
I totally agree. I mean, I think the England players in Bulgaria missed a big chance to make a statement there. I obviously I was at home. I'm not privy to the conversations they have and how they come to the final decision to stay on the pitch. I think if you have England, one of the biggest nations in world football, disrupting a qualifying game, a competitive game, to make a stand, regardless of the prospect of losing points.
Yes.
The statement that sends out, the attention it brings, the repercussions for the governing bodies. It's the repercussions for them and how they deal with it.
Yeah.
And the various messages that sends out in terms of what they do next.
Yeah.
Could have been a massive statement. We had the incident in Spain. It was Valencia. When they walked off when one of their players was racially abused, and I think the game carried on, but without him. You just think if Valencia had stayed off and all stayed off, then the spotlight straight away is on the Spanish Federation. How are they going to deal with that? Are you really going to punish a team for one of their, supporting one of their players who's been racially abused? Are you really going to punish them? They've ended up going back onto the pitch because it seems that was a threat.
Well, a very good template was the action taken by Landon Donovan and his teammates against homophobia in the United States, where they just said, "Look, we're off. That's it. End of." As Adrian points out, that should be the template. It's easy for us to say because we weren't in these conversations in Bulgaria, but all being well, that would have been lovely to. Obviously not lovely to see, but that would have been heartening to see and would have been supported by, any right-thinking person who looked at the issue.
Because I think that's where we are now with this situation. As I said, people have been dealing with it and trying to find solutions for years. You've had T-shirts, campaigns, adverts, etc. And it's just got to the point now where there needs to be much firmer action in terms of the punishments. And I fully understand it's a longer process in terms of educating the future generations about ultimately what's right and what's wrong. Yeah. There's certain things I don't do because I was brought up and told they were wrong. Simple as that. Yeah. That takes longer. That's not going to be the answer right now because it involves the education of a future generation who aren't going to be football fans maybe for some years. But
we have dealt with quite a few subjects today, but we've finished with the most important. And Adrian, I really thank you for all the points that that you've made today. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on The Perspective, and I hope we'll get you back.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Omar.
Yeah.
What do you feel?
I mean, thank you. I'm just going to echo Paddy's words once again. Thank you so much, Adrian, for coming on the show. We really appreciate it, and definitely do come on again when we invite you back down. That's for sure. We will be doing that. It's been a thoroughly enjoyable hour, and we've raised some very important topics, and your opinions have been greatly appreciated by both of us. But for all our prospective lovers, make sure you like, share, and subscribe, and comment below who your player of the year is as well, because we're not just the only ones who have a say in there. So, but thank you, and we'll see you again for the next one. Cheers.